been a couple weeks since our last video. I've been itching to get this thing in here to get it lowered. Way too tall for us right now. We've got 6 weeks until Southern Illinois Truck Showdown, and it's coming up quick. First off, I want to thank you guys for watching our first video. We've had a ton of views on it and a lot of comments, and I read the comments. You guys are, well, half of you, it's about 50-50, are a little upset that we're gonna be cutting up this old girl. Just want to let you know that I hear you. I see your comments. I get you don't want me to cut it up. So we're gonna start cutting this thing up today, and I'm super excited. Sorry guys. So we're gonna get this thing out of the garage. I'm gonna take it over to the shop for a little bit. We've got a lift over in the shop. I'm gonna get the bed off over there. We're just gonna have more room over there. I'll be able to get to the bed bolts a little easier than I will laying on the ground, which I'm not too fond of. So we're gonna get this thing out of the garage, over to the shop, get the bed off the gear. It's my least favorite part about a square body or any C10 is the frame rails are so narrow. We barely get, well, my lift at least, my lift on it. So I got old 8-ball up on the lift. If you're gonna be lowering any C10, really anything from, I mean, we do 60 to 98, any of those, I highly recommend taking the bed off. It's gonna make your life a lot easier. If you have four guys all together, a guy on each corner, you can pretty easily get it off. And it's, on this short bed, it's gonna be 8 bolts. I've already sprayed these bolts. You'll be able to see them. So these are carriage bolts. So you'll be able to see them from the top. Carriage bolts, if you don't know, have a rounded head and then like a square drive on the bottom of the rounded head. So that square drive is captured in the bed floor. So you kind of got to be careful, because if they pop up, if you got like a rusty truck, it can be a nightmare. This is a pretty clean truck, so I think we're going to be fine, hopefully, because I am the only one here tonight. And I don't have a buddy to stand on top of the bed to hold them down. Take your time. A wrench is probably best, and honestly a wrench is about the only thing you can get on them. Taking the bed off just opens up a whole world of space for you. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and take this tire off at this side just to give you guys a better idea of where I'm gonna mark this bed brace so that I don't have issues after I put on this frame notch. This is the bed brace that I'm referring to. So once we put our notch in here, our notch at least goes on the top, on the side, and on the bottom of the frame rail. So if I were to just leave this bed brace as is, I put the notch in, I go to put the bed back on, this brace is gonna touch the top of my notch before these other braces touch the top of the floor. So we'll have a little teeter action there. Some guys will leave it and just tighten it down. The notch is only 3/16 of an inch. You may not notice it. I, however, am going to notch this brace and then come back in with some sheet metal and weld it back in so it's not open. Just kind of clean it up, make it look a little bit better, I think. Take a little extra time here. We already have to do this because previous owner has cut this bed brace to clear a drop shackle. I may leave these drop shackles on the more I think about it, so I may be coming in here and doing the same thing that I'm gonna do to this bed brace, which is just cut it nice, put a piece of sheet metal in there, weld it up, sand it down, make it look nice and smooth, and kind of mold it in. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna take this pencil and I'm just gonna mark the edge of my frame rail. So that way, when I take the bed off, I know right where that is. Actually, I'm gonna mark and reference where it is on here too, because I might want to know that a little later on. So I'm gonna go ahead and do this to the other side, and then we will start loosening up all these bed bolts. All right, so now that I got my bed brace marked on both sides of the frame rail, so I know where to cut it, where to notch it, I'm gonna go ahead and raise this up a little bit so I can get my head under here, and we'll start taking off all of the nuts for the bed bolts. There's gonna be 8 on a short bed, and I'm gonna be using a 3/4 inch wrench. Hold that thought. I think this bed has been off before because it doesn't quite line up side to side with the cab sides, so I doubt they took the cab off, but I'm thinking maybe they had the bed off before. I'm gonna cheat with an extra wrench here. Try to break them free. They're pretty tight. They are very tight, actually. If it was off, been off for a while. Okay, there we go. Bad news, they're spinning. I think I might go get some fire. Heating the nut up expands the nut, makes it bigger than the bolt, which can help you, especially if you heat it up and then let it contract again, kind of break apart any grime or rust that may be in the threads there. So I think I'm gonna go run, grab a torch. This should work pretty good. I'm not gonna damage any paint. We're far away from any bed paint. While it's hot, I'm just gonna squirt it with some WD. In my theory, in my head at least, when it's hot and you squirt WD-40 or like PP Blaster on it, it kind of sucks it up in there, kind of like you're soldering. Don't know if that's true. Oh my goodness. That worked. Honestly, way better than I thought it was going to. I bet I could take it off with my fingers right now. If only it wasn't scalding hot. That method worked extremely well. So I think I'm gonna stick with that method moving forward. Yeah. Still. So I got all 8 bolts off. Hat came off. I almost remember why I love working on trucks. I was able to get this other one off, just put some vice grips on it. These bed bolts have like a round spot on the bottom of the bolt that doesn't have threads. So I just put some vice grips on there, heated it up. Heating it up was the way to go. Looking at this truck, there looks to be a massive amount of blue Loctite on all these, which is probably why I was having issues at first. I don't know if that's factory or if somebody put that on there. If somebody knows, put that in the comments. I'm curious to see if the factory used blue Loctite. The things that I have to take off are, got a vent hose here. That's just a 1/2 inch head. 1 plug. Can I do it with one hand? 1 plug. So that's like the tail light harness. Clip up here too. Pop that off. I think that we are ready to. I've got 1 more bolt, which I already talked about, and I already forgot about. So 1 more bolt. Other than that, we should be ready to go. I'm gonna go ahead and put our wheel back on, head back over to the garage because it is nicer, it's brighter, and it's got AC, and it's summertime and it's hot in Iowa, so let's get this done. Is put these 4x4s. I'm going to put these up underneath the bed rails here. I think this will work pretty good. Hey, guess what? Filler necks, gas tank. Forgot. So on this truck we've got dual fuel tanks. Looks like we're just gonna have to take off these 3 screws. Looks like this plastic cover will then come out and we can just lift the bed. I honestly can't believe I forgot that. I've had these fuel tanks on my mind. So I kind of like to delete one so I had some room for battery under there. We got trans cooler under there. So I'm looking at the Boyd stuff. So really surprised I forgot it, but I'm glad I checked before I went too high. We didn't mess anything up. So it looks like as I was pulling the bed off, I missed 3 screws in here, and under here there is a little screw here for the grounding strap. So this grounding strap runs up to the fuel filler neck. So that's on the bed brace, so that needs to come off. I'm happy that we caught that before we tried to lift any farther. But now I think that we can go ahead and lift this bed the rest of the way off. Got the bed lifted off via our fantastic fork truck here in the shop. Everything went good. Once I figured out I needed to unbolt those, dupe. So now I'm just gonna drive this truck out of the shop and go get the cart for that so we can get it out of the air and back on the ground safely. And I think before we call it a night, I'm gonna get the pressure washer out. And I mean, obviously it's pretty dirty under here. Get it cleaned up, maybe spray some degreaser stuff on there. It's nothing too crazy, so let's get the truck out of here. I think that's actually going to work pretty good. I built this part for a Squarebody Suburban. We bolted the cab to this when the interior was getting painted, so that works perfect. Okay. If anybody's ever looking for a pressure washer, Generac. This thing has been through hell. It's been launched off the back of a flatbed. It's washed 9,000 square foot of our shop when we bought it. I mean, we're 4 years in and this thing, you can't kill this thing. I've never done any maintenance to it. While we have the bed off, we're gonna go ahead and flip the axle, which is putting the axle from underneath the leaf spring on top of the leaf spring. That'll give us 6 inches. I was originally gonna put the stock shackles back on. I believe these were 1.5 inch drop shackles. I may leave them on there because I don't think 6 inches is gonna be low enough. We've got our frame notch to go in here. We've got our rear shock relocators to go on. I think while the bed is off too, we're gonna go ahead and put a rear frame cross member in it. Kind of do quick instructions on that. We've got some tuck brackets coming from Holly. Tuck this bumper in a little bit more. So we're back on the truck this morning. We're gonna go ahead and try to get this entire back end of the truck lowered. And my goal by the end of today is to have the whole back end lowered. That way we can do the front in our next video. Having this bed off is really gonna help us make this job a lot easier. So I am going to get the jack out and some jack stands, get it up as high as I can, and start ripping this thing apart. I already know what you guys are gonna say about my wood under my jack stands. It's fine. I need some height. The rear jack stands are just gonna be temporary. The square bodies are, there's a lot of stuff on square body frame rails, and they've got a lot of kick ups. It's kind of hard to do it farther forward. I'm not gonna leave the rear jack stands here. When we do the notches, it's way too much weight in the middle of the truck. We'll reposition it all, but this is gonna be great for getting the leaf springs off, getting the flip kit on. It's gonna give us a bunch of room to do what we need to do before we start cutting the frame rail. We're gonna go ahead and start ripping all of this extra miscellaneous stuff off, getting wiring, brake lines out of the way. And disconnect this brake line, I can drop this rear axle to the ground on the tires, which will really get it out of my way. So we also have a brake line here. There's a bolt we'll take off because we're going to be cutting our notch in this area, so that's going to have to be moved out of the way. I take one more off, just give me a little bit more. Now, we'll go to our brake line. We can massage that guy out of the way. And then on this other frame rail, we have wiring on the driver's side. Try to save that guy so we can use it again later. Got another clip back here I'm gonna get out of the way. Give us plenty of room so when we're cutting, we don't damage our wiring, we don't damage our brake line, and make more work for ourselves later. I'm gonna go ahead and get these U-bolts the rest of the way off, and then I can drop this rear end to the ground. So before we take the leaf springs off, I'm gonna explain to you guys the difference in leaf spring length. So GM square body trucks came with either a 52-inch long leaf spring or a 56-inch long leaf spring. And how you determine what length leaf spring you have, because that is important when doing a flip kit, is the brackets that are attached to the frame itself, not the leaf spring back here, the actual bracket that is attached to the frame. So you're going to measure center of this bolt all the way up to the center of this bolt. So that measurement will either be 52 inches or 56 inches. Most half-ton trucks are going to be 52-inch leaf springs. Get a bolt out or try to pound it out. These front ones are especially hard because of the way that it's kind of encapsulated up here. I know the rear has been removed before because it has a shackle, a lowering shackle on it. Bolt's loose. Take them out. Put them under. And we'll get them bolted back up. I think I'm just going to go ahead and do the front first. So the rear has the shackle. Oh, I got it. got the rear end jacked up. I got one leaf spring on while I was waiting for the camera to cool down from 6,000 degrees. Pretty easy putting them back in, especially if you got a buddy with you. These are luckily half-ton springs. 3/4 ton springs are about a nightmare to do by yourself. I mean 1-ton springs. Those things suck, but they're pretty light. Back in with the axle on top of the leaf springs instead of underneath the leaf springs. And then now we can go ahead and get our flip kit set in place, which is going to cradle this axle tube. So I'm gonna go grab new parts now, which is exciting. Let's go take a look at what we got to put on the back of this truck before we actually start putting everything back on. Here's the table full of all the stuff that we've got for the back of this truck. We've got our flip kit, which is gonna give us 6 inches of drop, U-bolt plates, brand new U-bolts. We've got our 73 to 87 C10 frame notches, which will come with bump stops, all the grade 8 hardware you'll need. We've got our new rear shock relocators. These are not powder coated yet. We just came out with these, so we've got a set of those over at the powder coater. Hardware to go with those. That's gonna lower our lower shock mount down so we can keep a nice long shock in there. And here are the stock shackles that I purchased. I don't think I'm gonna use those. I'm gonna go ahead and try the drop shackles that were already on here because we like that low life. So let's go ahead and get the flip kit put on and I'll show you how to orientate that and why your 52 or 56 inch leaf spring measurement matters. This is our flip kit. So you see it has 2 different sets of holes. So this flip kit is just going to sit on the bottom of the axle. It's gonna cup the tube and it's also going to come up and grab this leaf spring pad mount, if you will, to help keep the axle from rotating under driving. So you've got this locating pin that is in your leaf pack. This holds the leaves together. It also holds this axle in place from moving back and forth. So you can see we have 2 sets of holes. This offset hole is for if you have 52 inch leaf springs. So if you have the 52 inch leaf springs, you're gonna use this offset hole. That offset hole is gonna go towards the front of the truck, just like you see. If you have 56, you're gonna use the center hole, and that's gonna keep your axle, either one, right where you want it to keep it centered in the rear wheel opening. So this is just gonna slide right over top of that pin. We have 52 inch leaf springs, so we're using the offset hole. We'll get these just set on here on both sides, and then we'll go ahead and lower the axle down into the saddle here. Now that we got our axle on the right side, flip kit in, and take our U-bolt plate. So U-bolt plate has the same center hole and offset hole, 52 inch, 56 inch. So we're gonna go ahead and put that guy just like that, using that locator pin, just like we did on the top. Careful of your brake lines. You don't wanna smash those guys. Your U-bolts from the factory, when they tighten them down, they stretch them. They tend to get a lot of buildup from the stock U-bolt plate, especially on the bigger trucks, to where you won't even be able to see it, but these things will be just tiny little pieces of rod just from it rusting away with all the dirt and debris that sits up there. So it's a little extra cost. I think we charge like 65 bucks for 4 U-bolts with the kit, but you're gonna be real upset when you go to do this and you find out your U-bolts are rotted away, and they're really kind of a one-time use bolt. You shouldn't reuse them. Now our flip kit does not set pinion angle, so we will address that later on after we get the entire truck lowered back together on the wheels and tires we're going to use on the ground at full weight, and then we'll see what the pinion angle is and we'll shim it accordingly, but you really can't do it yet. We're just going to snug these up do the other side just like this. Then I think we are gonna move on to the notch, everybody's favorite part, cutting up a truck. All right guys, so now we're at the point where we are going to be taking our frame notches and we're gonna be cutting the frame to fit those, drilling holes for the 1/2-inch hardware. This is the most terrifying part for most people. A lot of people are scared to cut their frame. I am not one of those. So we have our frame notch here. This is one that we sell. It is going to go in place here. Our frame notches are made from 3/16 plate. So first thing we're gonna have to do is get this factory bump stop bracket off. So all that entails are these 4 rivets here. Again, remember, there's stuff behind this frame rail. This side has brake lines, the other side has wiring for the taillights and such. So we're gonna go ahead and get these rivets ground out, get that bracket knocked off, and then we're gonna start laying out our frame rail here to put in our new notch. So here I am cheating a little bit because I make these, so I just have one that doesn't have the center in. But you can use the one that you get in your kit, just flip it around so that the notch part will be towards the outside. But a really great way to figure out where your notches are, and also why I like to do the flip kit first. So the flip kit is going to put this axle tube nice and close to the bottom of the frame rail here, so you can physically see where that notch needs to be, so your axle tube is centered in the opening after you cut it out. On the square bodies, there is this oval hole. Center of that oval hole over to the center of our frame notch is going to be 1.5 inches. So that is a great measurement. I would still check it for your application, but 1.5 inch center over, and then we can just use this to mark our holes. I'm going to pull this off. I'm going to show you one very important thing you want to do before you cut this part out of your frame rail. Where the 2 leading edges intersect the point, center punch that. We're going to drill these 2 intersecting points of where we're going to cut out. We're going to drill that 1/2 inch. What that's going to do is it's going to create a radiused corner instead of a hard corner. Hard corners, if I cut this and I cut this, the frame's flexing as I'm driving down the road a couple thousand miles, it's going to crack there. That's a really prone place to start cracking. A circle is much harder to crack, so you're going to get a nice radius there. That's going to keep it from wanting to crack a lot better than just cutting them straight. Got all my holes center punched. I'm getting ready to start drilling them. Make your life easier and step your drill bits up. So I'm going to start with 1/8. That's going to be my pilot hole. That's going to give me a nice precise pilot hole to start with. I'm going to step up to 1/4, 3/8. Then if you really want to make your life easy, go pick yourself up a ream. So a ream is a tapered drill bit. The flutes travel up the drill bit instead of kind of sideways. This makes a really nice hole. It doesn't like to catch. Can catch, but it doesn't like to, and it creates a much smoother, nicer hole. So they are kind of pricey, but when you have a bunch of 1/2 inch holes to drill, that's not fun, and this will make your life much, much better in the end. So I'm gonna start piloting these holes with my 1/8 inch drill bit, and then we'll keep stepping up from there. Now this ream that I have is 5/8. We're using 1/2 inch hardware, which will come with our notches. So I'm not gonna go all the way through because I don't want a super big hole. So I'm gonna go to where I know I need to go for it to be 1/2 inch. Double check it with a bolt out of the hardware kit. So you can see that brake line hanging down. Just kind of massage that guy out of the way. All right, so now that we've got all the hard parts on the truck, we've got the flip kit, we've got the frame notch, we put our rear shock relocators on, everything is just loosely bolted on right now. I went ahead and made a list quick of things that we need to wrap up on the back half of the truck before we move on to the front. So first thing on my list can be the rear shocks. So I just did a little bit of measuring off camera. It looks like the factory shocks are still gonna be too long if, like, worst case scenario, we hit a big dip in the road and we bottom this thing out. So I'm gonna have to find another shock. We use a lot of Monroes. Honestly, this isn't gonna keep whatever shocks we put on it for very long. We'll probably end up switching to a Ride Tech, or we're gonna be changing out this whole suspension not in too much time. So I gotta do a little research, figure out a cheap shock option with the right bolt size and the right compressed length, so we're not bottom out shocks, we're hitting bump stops. So this is the hole that's already in the stock bracket, and just kind of saddles that, and then you'll be able to bolt your shock down here instead of up there, which gives you a little more length, and it kicks it out farther so the shock isn't at such an angle when you bolt it back up. The straighter up and down you can get your shocks, the better they're gonna work. Another thing we need to do are the brake lines. So we loosened up the factory brake lines, all the clamps to get it out of the way so we could cut that notch in. So we need to secure that back in place, bend it up a little bit to get it around our notch. Same thing with the taillight wiring, is we need to reattach that to the frame rail, because we did the same thing. We got that out of the way so we could cut our notch in. And before I forget, we also need to replace our soft line that we cut from the chassis down to the rear end. Use the bolt we took off, fits, it's the right line. It's just surprising because they never give you the right lines. Maybe? Yep. Okay, so now this guy's gonna come up here. Let's go get some pliers. We'll remove this clip quick, make the switch here nice and fast. And then just like a final bolt check, go through everything, make sure everything's tight, get our leaf springs tight, our frame notches tight, our flip kit with our U-bolts tight, although we are gonna have to come back after the truck's completely lowered and figure out our pinion angle, see if we need to shim that at all. So that's gonna do it for Project 8 Ball today. We've got everything on the back wrapped up. While you guys are watching this video, we're gonna get started on the front. We're gonna be doing drop springs, drop spindles, new shocks in the front. While we're there, we're gonna go ahead and do ball joints. Hopefully there's not a whole lot more that we need up front, mainly because I don't know how long the truck is gonna stay in this rendition. We've got bigger plans for it very soon. So thank you guys for watching. Stay tuned and keep watching our 8 Ball videos. We're having a lot of fun doing it. Thanks, guys.